Hey guys, and welcome back. Today we are talking to Koen Leurs, Assistant Professor in Gender and Postcolonial Studies at the Graduate Gender Program. In his personal research, Koen focuses on digital migration and on media literacy for migrants. Thanks for joining the interview, Koen. Could you tell me a bit more about yourself? What is it you do at the university, and why have you chosen to teach at Gender Studies?
First off, thanks very much for this initiative. Thanks for welcoming me into this conversation. I think particularly in the present moment when we're not as much dialoguing in public, I think this is a wonderful effort, and I'm happy to join the series of conversations and also to learn more about what my colleagues have been up to. So I've been actually in and out of the department first as a student since 2001, 2002 when I started my bachelor in communication and information study, after which I did my research master in media studies, and gradually I moved and drew connections also with gender studies. So I started my PhD in gender studies in the department, working with Professor Sandra in the department, on exactly questions around diversity, the internet migration, and identity. And after a 2-year stint at the London School of Economics as a postdoc, I returned in 2015 to teach in the gender program. So since 2015, I've been coordinator of the bachelor and minor in gender studies, as well as the minor of postcolonial studies. And I'm also the advisor for the major in gender and postcolonial studies for liberal arts and sciences students and TCS students.
And yeah, like I said, you focus on digital migration. What does that mean exactly? Why are you interested in this?
And I think particularly both of these larger processes, so increasing digitization of society, as well as increased attention for migration in various forms. When we take them both together, we can learn more about the different implications of ongoing cultural globalization. So we know, and we have within scholarship and in our teaching have been addressing issues around migration and issues around digitization, but there has been little attention for how these two actually relate. So, for example, the impact of the media in dominantly representing migration in a certain way. Think of our so-called European migration crisis, when we saw specific images of migrants crossing the Mediterranean, for example. But also on the other side, we should, for example, raise attention much more for what kind of experimentations happen. So what kind of innovations and surveillance technologies, for example, are now being made at the European border. There's very little awareness of what major experiments are being conducted on vulnerable groups at the border. And this is, I think, why it's particularly urgent to draw attention to these dynamics.
Recently, you have edited an edition of the magazine Global Perspectives. This edition was called Media, Migration and Nationalism, and was based on a seminar you did in Tokyo with Tomohisa Hirata. Could you tell me a bit more about this project?
Yeah, around this time, or within several weeks, this issue on media migration and nationalism will be published. And this is as a result of a longer collaboration with Professor Hirata from Gunma University in Tokyo. And it's also a culmination of this collaboration. So we first got together, I think, in 2016. And over time, we tried to both bring our expertise and interests together. So to see how, from an Asian perspective and European perspective, we can learn from what's happening in processes related to exactly nationalism, migration, and the media and how they intersect. So in 2017, we wrote a proposal to the Dutch Research Council, as well as the Japanese Society for the Promotion of Science, to organize a seminar to bring together scholars working in Europe and scholars working in Japan to discuss similarities and differences.
Yeah.
And this was also an opportunity for students, so for younger scholars, both within the Netherlands as well as in Japan, to come together and to share experiences and to share and to give each other feedback.
Yeah. And how did you connect? I mean, how did you got to know each other?
I think the first instance came, and this is, I think, what's indicative for a lot of networking within academia, is I think Tomohisa posted a notice on a mailing list of one of our associations. I think maybe the Association of Internet Research in 2016, when he first organized in Japan a meeting to bring together young scholars from across the world and to interact with Japanese colleagues. And I've also previously studied in Singapore, so I've always been interested to see also from outside of Europe to kind of globalize our perspective, but also to center our European perspectives. And this was also one of his main reasons why he felt, okay, there's already an interest also for me to kind of look also outside of the European frame.
For the seminar, you had 4 artworks made. Could you explain a bit more about what the artworks are and how did you use them to tell your story?
So we got funding to organize a seminar in Tokyo, which took place in October 2018. And the seminar we held in Tokyo in a public space in a former school, which turned into a public art venue. And since we didn't want to kind of isolate our discussion only to academia, Tomohisa also invited visual artists to convey kind of our discussions in a different genre, in a different outlet. Yeah. And also to bring on those artistic perspectives again to for us to reflect on our scholarship.
Which artists worked on the project?
So there were 4 artists involved to cover sort of the 4 themes that we wanted to address. And the first artist is Takashi Tanihata, and he produced 2 pieces, which is a letter that isn't read number 1 and a letter that isn't read number 2. And in these paintings, we see 2 goats that send each other letters, but they eat this letter before reading it. And so the first receiving goat eats the letter, so he doesn't know what message is conveyed, but he sends a letter back to the first goat to ask what was in the letter, where this goat again eats the letter. And this kind of visual thematic illustrates discussions around the role of the media and nationalism with regards to questions of cosmopolitanism. So to what extent are people interested and engaged and have a disposition towards the other versus questions around polarization. So do media indeed lead to isolation, to ghettoization, to people withdrawing within their own communities? Yeah. So that's the first artist. The second artist is by an artist who goes under the pseudonym of XX. And her art piece is called The Sand on the Borders. And in this painting, we see several perfume bottles with kind of small aerosols circulating around them. And this conveys the broader theme of border control, migration management, and surveillance. So this speaks about and visualizes how there is always a sense of being able to cross borders, to move across. But also of this increased almost cat and mouse game where officials try to innovate and use new technologies to detect border trespasses. And most recent technological innovation is exactly to detect border crossings of human beings on the basis of detections of smell. So these are technologies that go under the name of sniffer, advanced kind of smell detector technologies, and this is also what's informing this visualization. The third image is called The Vision, a reportage. Produced by Motoi Hirata. And this speaks about how people living outside of their home country to engage in different forms of transnational connectivity. So how people maintain connected in the diaspora. Yeah. The fourth image is called The Spread, and it's produced by Satsuki Inokimoto. And this team addresses to what extent people living in cities as well as in social media engage in cities and social media as cultural contact zones.
How do you think the coronavirus impacts digital migration?
So in our introduction essay, Tomohisa and I, we try to articulate exactly how the corona crisis situation actually resonates with different recent several crisis situations. So first, the economic crisis, then the so-called migration crisis, as well as the climate crisis. So in all these kind of made extraordinary situations, we see how a regular order is kind of abandoned. So this is a moment where indeed exceptional measures are allowed or are deemed necessary. And exactly in these moments, we see how in many instances, human rights of particularly vulnerable groups, including migrants, are suspended. So there's a push for new technologies being deployed and advanced to exactly control migration and mobility. Because we also see how here media and nationalism together play into the negative sentiment. So we see in these crisis situations how very often mobile subjects, migrants, become scapegoats of these crises. So during COVID, we saw a lot of racist attacks against Asian migrants in Western cities, for example.
Thank you, Koen, for this informative talk. I hope you have a great summer and good luck during the next academic year.
Thanks a lot for having me. Looking forward also to seeing the other interviews when they come out.